playing Hades now in 2025 is a big throwback to 5 years ago when I first played Hades 1 and Doom Eternal for months at a time during COVID. And I just really remember that period quite fondly. And so I feel to some degree it's hard to tell how much of it is my personal experience or how whether it was more or less trends in gaming, but that to me felt like the floodgate where a lot more games have roguelike elements from that point forward. I know there were games before that like A Binding of Isaac, etc. Or I think it's around the time the Slay the Spire came out, where there were games that were becoming quite popular, but now I see screenshots of like NBA 2K games where your season has roguelike elements to it. And to me, that was when I really first started to appreciate these kind of details and this kind of play style. Hades 2 is such a perfect gameplay setup. It is so fun to have a 35-minute run when you're first starting to play the game. Whenever you go back to the base, there's new things to unlock. Every single run, you're trying a new weapon, you're getting new boons. You're starting to like understand how the game works. I look back to one of my previous VODs when I was about halfway done the game, and I was like, wow, I was terrible. I probably still am to some degree by some people's standards, but the more that you know how moves work and bosses work, the more kind of sharp and accurate you can be. But the way that the Greek mythology is almost like educational to some degree, the way the Greek mythology and immortality is baked into the dying and replaying setup, the way that over time you are iterating and getting better while having pass or fail each run still seems like progress. They have such a perfect 30 to 40 minute sit down session. And that is basically what you want in a game a lot of times. To be able to knock out a 35-minute run and to feel like you've made progress is so satisfying. And I love that part of it quite a bit. So the real strengths of Hades are like a perfect iteration on the formula of a roguelike game. I really do think it's totally perfect. The game feels really, really quick. It feels really, really responsive. I like the weapon choices, and it just in most gameplay aspects, they've improved on the first game, and it's a smooth, refined experience. I think those are the strengths of it. They basically have understood that format. The weaknesses of the game to me are in writing and in combat, ironically. I don't think it's hard to differentiate combat from gameplay, but to me, I think that the combat is not great to some level. I think that a lot of the enhanced versions of the bosses are not very well done by the standards of other exacting combat games. Obviously, particularly the Cerberus fight is not great. It's not good, really. Some other times you can find yourself in some circumstance where there's just so much BS happening on screen that you're kind of stuck in a corner. So for me, it doesn't feel like it's always testing you perfectly. I think it's just a little bit of like avoiding messy circumstances. Hecate has a moon ray ability that'll just totally appear at 90% of the screen and start rotating, which you don't really have warning on. Cerberus fight again, anyone who's done the enhanced Cerberus fight will know it's pretty terrible. Um, those are like the two main examples. The other part of this, which I don't love, is that sometimes you won't choose a boon that should objectively make you do more damage because you just literally have to control for visual noise sometimes. It's not realistic to have as much stuff happening on screen as is happening on screen without it to some degree affecting your ability to take in information and be able to dodge and react. So sometimes, especially with the with Ignium or some of the other ranged weapons, you'd be like, well, I like that ability that's going to do more damage, like maybe like a hammer buff, but I can't take it because it's just going to be such a mess on screen that you won't necessarily have as good an ability of retaining everything. So that I think could be better. It is really, really fun, but as you get into harder difficulties and understand the game more, you kind of squeeze a little bit too much juice out of the orange a little bit, and it starts to be a little more annoying. But I think that's the case for a lot of games. You're like once you start to know it really, really well and start to push the limits of how good you can be, you do lose some enjoyment. So it's not unique to this one, but I do think combat is not great. My other principal complaint with this game is that um, compared to the first game where Zagreus is kind of like beaten up a little bit and everyone's kind of like making it tough for him and there's like a sardonic sort of funny cynicism to the game. This game is pretty soft in the writing to the point where in the second half of like you playing, it's just kind of eye-rollingly gentle dialogue most of the time. You talk to most people and Milinui and them just talk about like their like how sensitive they're feeling and how much they care about each other and like I'm worried about this and I just am so comfortable being around you and cheers to you and all the great things you're doing. My pet theory on this is that now that they've made a lot of money from Hades 1, these people are their lives are better, so the dialogue is softer and by definition more boring. So I find compared to Zagreus who's kind of getting just like talked down to and he's got like sort of a cynical shield up, this game is more kind of eye-rollingly soft. It's not really interesting. Maybe if I was like 14 and going through a lot, I would find it really resonant or something. But to me, my central other complaint here is how boring the dialogue gets to as you increase your relationship levels with most people. The one exception to this is Strife, who's still, or Eris, who still kind of is fun to talk to for most of the game, but this is not the case with almost anybody else. And so these are my central complaints with it. Basically, this also ties into what most people's complaints are with the initial story ending. It's just like, what? Like, it's such a weird pivot when it comes to like Kronos' personality that I was waiting for the true ending to see if it was all sort of a ruse, but no. So again, this was so fun for 15, 20 hours and continue to be quite engaging through like the 100-ish nights it takes to for me to get most of the stuff done. But I do think writing wise and visual noise wise, it has a lot of ways it could improve. But otherwise, like literally like an 8 to 8.5 game, hugely enjoyable, probably for a broad amount of people who will probably never hear about it. And like an excellent game to be really, really into for like a week and a half. Okay, thanks.